Hello, so today I want to talk to you about some more crime and mystery novels. This is following on from my last video, and the theme of today's video is Scottish authors in the crime genre. So I have really enjoyed all the books I'm going to talk to you about today, and some of them have a more traditional detective doing all the work. Other ones play with the conventions of the novel a little bit, and they're not your standard mystery or detective novel, but all of them are really interesting and I've enjoyed them a lot, so I hope you will too. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, please subscribe, and let's start talking about the books. So the first book that I'm going to talk to you about today is actually part of a trilogy, but for obvious reasons I'm only going to talk about the first book, because if I talked about the other two, it would ruin the ending of the first one, and that is not what you want with a mystery novel. So that is Garnethill by Denise, Mina, and it is part of the Garnethill trilogy. Garnethill is an area in Glasgow, and this book is set in Glasgow, and it follows a young woman who wakes up one morning and discovers that her boyfriend has been murdered in her living room. Her name is Maureen, and she is one of my favourite characters I've read about this year. She has a really dark background, and I'm talking like really dark. Like if you have any sort of sensitivities to dark subjects, this is maybe not the book for you, because it goes into some pretty brutal places. But she has a really dark history behind her, so that kind of makes her a bad victim. The police won't pin the crime on her. People around her kind of assume that she might have just killed him and she is responsible for his murder, but obviously she knows that she's innocent, so she goes out there and tries to solve the mystery for herself, because the police aren't helping her at all and everyone else is kind of letting her down. She does have a best friend who is on her side, and I love their friendship, and that relationship through all three books is one of like the strongest points. And what is really fun about this whole trilogy is the characters and also just the setting of Glasgow. I thought that Denise Mina used Glasgow in such a realistic way. I think that some authors have this tendency to paint the city that they're writing in, and especially Glasgow, I've noticed with some Scottish books, in such a like grimy, dark light, to the point where nothing seems real. Everyone is like this heightened, violent character, and Denise Mina keeps everyone very realistic. Obviously, there is some dark, dangerous things going on in the books, but the everyday people that Maureen meets on her journey are all just so interesting, so fascinating. Her whole family are a bunch of characters, obviously literary characters, but just like also just like they have the craziest personalities, and her family is so dysfunctional, but also they really keep you on your toes. And obviously, with it being a trilogy, things develop over the three novels that just upset me, blew me away, shocked me, almost made me cry, tears of joy and tears of sorrow. It's just an amazing trilogy, and I think that Denise Mina is such a good writer. And something I also really enjoyed about it, obviously, is that because I am so used to the settings, I just know the area so well, and the things that she's describing, the places that Maureen is going, it all felt so alive to me. So that's obviously a little touch that if you don't live in Glasgow, you might not feel as strongly about. But I just thought this was an amazing book, and I loved the whole trilogy. I flew through them so fast. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Crow Road by Iain Banks. Now, Iain Banks' most famous novel is The Wasp Factory, in my opinion anyway, I would say so. It's also his most popular on Goodreads, and I read that a few years ago and I did like it. I thought the characters in it were extremely nasty and unlikable, but The Crow Road completely changes that. The characters here are all so interesting and unique. So The Crow Road is about this young boy Prentice, and he is feeling kind of aimless in his life. He doesn't really know where his life is going or what he's doing, and he has a very large, expansive, complicated family, and it does become difficult at times during this novel to keep track of who's who. I eventually got my head wrapped around who the main characters are, but just know that if you're going into this, there's a lot of characters. But anyway, this family has this kind of mystery and secret to it, where when Prentice was either really young or just before he was born, I can't remember now, his uncle went missing, and nobody really knows if the uncle is abroad traveling, if he died, if he was murdered, if he just ran away. Like, nobody really knows what happened to the uncle, and it's this like kind of mystery that's lurked over the family for all these years. And the novel jumps in and out of time periods. It goes back to when Prentice's father and the uncle were young, and then has Prentice at a younger age. It has Prentice in like the present day of the novel, and it jumps around a little bit, so it gets a little hard at times to wrap your head around. But once you kind of get the grip on the book, it is really satisfying, and everything comes together so perfectly. Like I said, there's so many characters, it's such a huge family, but that really adds to the intrigue of the novel. because everyone drops little breadcrumbs here and there of information, and it all wraps up really perfectly, in my opinion. I thought the ending of this book was great, and the way it all came together was really fantastic. And Iain Banks has such a distinct writing style to him. Obviously, I've only actually read 2 books so far, but The Wasp Factory and this both have a lot of like dark humor to them. Even when there's like really dark, tragic circumstances being talked about and like events in the family's history, Banks has this kind of just dark humor to him, and it makes the book have some lightness in the darkness, I would say. There's a lot of darkness in this book, but it's also a lot of light. And like I said, the characters are also interesting, and the family. I honestly would recommend maybe writing down names as you go, because there's a lot of characters, but all in, it's a really fantastic book that comes together so well. And like I said at the start, this isn't really your traditional detective novel. Prentice is kind of just looking into his uncle's mystery because he doesn't really know what to do with himself, and he doesn't really expect to actually land in this bigger web, but things just keep spiraling and spiraling the more he digs into it. So I would recommend this a lot. I thought it was really fun. It is a chunkier book. It will take you a while to get through, and like I said, it does play with your head a little bit because it jumps around time periods, there's a lot of characters, but Iain Banks' writing is great and it all comes together well. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Singing Sands by Josephine, and this is technically book 6 in a series. And if you watched my last video, I talked about the franchise affair. That is technically book 4 in the same series. However, this is one of those mystery series where you can jump in wherever. The books are all pretty much standalones, and obviously if you read them from book 1 onwards, you would probably get a more satisfying overall story, but every book works individually on its own. And this was the first one I read, and it was book 6, and I really enjoyed it, and I understood everything fine, so I would say take my recommendation. You don't actually need to start in book 1. Anyway, so The Singing Sands is the most traditional of the novels that I've talked about so far because it has a traditional detective and his name is Inspector Grant. And what is interesting about this book is that the mystery is actually more of the B plot, and Inspector Grant's personal struggles are actually more of the A plot. So the B plot, the mystery, or what probably is the A plot, but it doesn't fully read this way, is that a young man dies on a train, and with his body, obviously they have his belongings, and there's a poem there about singing sands. So Inspector Grant sees this and he just has this light bulb in his head before there meets the eye with this man's death. So he goes off to investigate, and that is all good and well. However, what is most interesting about this is the personal struggles. So Inspector Grant at this stage, obviously it's a later book in the series, but like I said, you can read them whatever. He is dealing with a lot of anxiety, he is really overworked, and what is interesting to me is that you really see these struggles from a 1950s perspective, which is when the book was published. I think it was published in 1952. So obviously they don't even really have the words to describe what is going on, but it's very clear that he is struggling with like panic attacks and just overwhelming anxiety, maybe even a little bit of PTSD, I don't really know, but he is trying to deal with this, but also having that undeniable urge to investigate, because it is what he does, it is who he is an investigator. And even when he's trying to, relax, put his mind at ease, he can't help but investigate a mystery that's right in front of him. So I really enjoyed this a lot. I thought that Josephine Tey balanced that kind of personal struggle with the mystery really well, and it was a unique book because of that. And I will say, the ending, I didn't love how everything wrapped up in this one. I think it got a little bit silly. It felt a little outdated, perhaps. But the overall book was still really good. Her writing is excellent. And it works really well as like a character study into an overworked, anxious, stressed out detective. So I would recommend this still, even if I didn't completely love the ending. Finally, I want to talk about a book that everyone knows but may not actually have read, and that is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is one of those books, like I just said, that I feel like everyone knows the ending, and I can't really even imagine reading the book without knowing the ending. I think it would be a totally different experience because as modern readers who exist in the world, this is obviously one of the most famous like gothic horror mystery books there is. And even just the terminology of like Jekyll and Hyde, that has meaning in our everyday life. Like if you describe someone as that, people know what you mean. So it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of someone from probably the time period reading this for the first time and not knowing what the mystery is. But Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it here, just in case on the off chance someone doesn't know. So the basic premise is that it follows a lawyer who is investigating a lot of strange occurrences between his friend Dr. Jekyll and this mysterious man in London, Mr. Hyde, who's causing a lot of trouble, a lot of drama, and is just all round not a nice person. So something that I think people who haven't read this book wouldn't expect is that the prose is just like beautiful. The way that Robert Louis Stevenson creates mystery and tension is so strong, so dramatic. Absolutely love it. The London setting, like I said, is like a gothic book, so it's very strong with like atmosphere, and it's all around just a fantastic book for the most part. Like a couple others that I've kind of mentioned, and I don't think the ending completely lands. I think that the way that the mystery is kind of explained to the reader at the end falls flat a little bit, but overall this is such a strong book that has had such a important cultural impact on literature and then also just like society as a whole in a way, which sounds over the top to say, but I really think that it's one of those books that has created language and has created phrases that we use in our daily lives. So if you haven't read this and you don't know what the mystery is, read it 100%. Even if you do know what the mystery is, I would still recommend reading it just to see it for yourself, because it is such a famous book. And it's one that, like I said, everyone knows, but everyone may not actually have read for themselves. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Quickly before you go, you might notice some books have went missing. I want to recommend a series really quickly that isn't actually by a Scottish author, but it is set in Scotland. The author is actually Mexican, and it's one of my favourite mystery series that, or probably my favourite full stop mystery series that I've ever read. And it is the Frey and McGray series by Oscar de Muriel, and I own 4 of the books, but I've read all of them, and these are so fun. They're about a Scottish detective who is so kooky, so crazy, very eccentric, and his very realistic English partner, and they go and solve mysteries together, and they all have kind of like a supernatural twist to them, and the Scottish detective fully believes in the supernatural and the English one thinks it's a load of rubbish, so they butt heads and they have a really fun relationship that develops over all the books. And again, you can kind of jump into most of these without reading the other ones. I think I read like book 3 or 4 first by accident, because I didn't even realise I went back, but these are also fun. The only one I wouldn't really recommend jumping into without reading others is the last one, The Sign of the Devil. It's a fantastic book, but it definitely, because it's the final one in the series, it relies on your knowledge of the other ones. It builds off a lot of other storylines. But yeah, for the most part, these are all great. And I know they don't really totally fit the theme of the video, but they're set in Scotland. Just Scottish detective. I love them. So yeah, I would recommend these a lot. Give them a read. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was useful. I hope you found some good book recommendations. If you did, please leave a like, please subscribe. Let me know in the comments down below any other Scottish authors that write in the mystery genre that you've read. There are so many. There's a whole kind of subgenre of mystery and crime called like tartan noir, which is set in Scotland, has Scottish settings, Scottish characters, and isn't always written by Scottish people, but you know, obviously a lot of them are. So if you have any you want to recommend to me, leave them in the comments down below. I hope to make some more videos soon, so please subscribe, and I will see you then. Thank you for watching.